This is Tom Fox, and I'd like to welcome you to a new season of the award-winning Adventures in Compliance, the podcast where we look at the Sherlock Holmes short stories, movies, novels, and related material from the angle of compliance. The Case-Book of Sherlock Holmes is the final set of 12 out of a total of 56 Sherlock Holmes short stories published by Arthur Conan Doyle. These were published, of course, in the Strand Magazine between October 1921 and April 1927. The books, are two of the short stories, The Adventure of the Veiled Lodger and The Old Shuscombe Old Place, were the last of the Sherlock Holmes works protected by copyright. Although some of the stories are comparable with earlier works, many people feel that this is a lesser offering of Holmes, to which I wholeheartedly disagree. I hope that you will join us for this exploration of the final collected works of Sherlock Holmes as we take a deep dive literally into business ethics, leadership, investigative strategies, pattern recognition, and perhaps even portending the use of AI and generative AI as a tool for the compliance professional. There are some great stories in here, and I know you will enjoy them, and I hope you will enjoy this season of Adventures in Compliance really as much as I've enjoyed reading the stories. If you've enjoyed this award-winning series or any of the Sherlock Holmes works, I hope you will subscribe or rate and review to this podcast series, Adventures in Compliance. This podcast series contains promotional material throughout the podcast. Today, the adventure of the Blanched Soldier. We're going to have a quick word from our network sponsor, Ethico, then we'll be right back.
If you're a compliance officer, middle managers are crucial in getting your programs from you to your frontline employees. But how do we activate those managers and get them on our side? Ethico's new Middle Manager Toolkit equips you with the skills needed to empower your managers, to promote a culture where ethical behavior thrives and employees feel empowered to speak up. Learn how to turn frontline managers into ethical leaders with our new white paper, Empowering Middle Managers as Ethics Champions. And did I mention you can get the whole toolkit for free? Head to ethico.com to download the full toolkit today.
New and different for the upcoming Compliance Week celebration in November, check out The Compliance Kids. It's my 3-book children's series on compliance and compliance professionals for children, but they make great gifts and great training tools for your employees. You can check it out on Amazon.com. We've linked to it in the show notes. In this story, which was released in the Strand Magazine in October 1926, was set in the immediate aftermath of the Boer War. The story begins with what appears to be a simple missing persons case. James Dodd, once of the Imperial Yeomanry, is anxious to find a trace of a friend and fellow soldier, Geoffrey Emsworth. Letters to the family home elicited only a terse and seemingly unwilling explanation that Emsworth is off traveling around the world, but Dodd has his doubts. A visit to old Colonel Emsworth only makes matters more uneasy, especially after one of the servants seems to speak of Geoffrey in the past tense. Dodd asks if this means his friend is dead or was dead, and the butler says no, but he might have been better off if he were. Up that night in his bedroom, Dodd sees Geoffrey at the window. He left the next day, eventually driven away by the colonel. But he caught one final clue before he departed, a man walking away from an apparently deserted outbuilding and a second man within. In that building, he seemed certain, was his friend Geoffrey. But stranger and stranger, Holmes has his own theories, although the manner in which he explains them does seem to run absolutely contrary to all he's learned in the past. Why, he asks, would a family shut up its own members in such a place? If you're Jethro Rewcastle, late of the Copper Beeches, it would be to keep your daughter from a persistent fiancé. If you're Mr. Culverton Smith, In the case of the dying detective, is because you have infected your son with a deadly Asian disease. If you are, and so on and so forth. No such sinister machinations are here, however. Silly ones maybe, but sinister no. Young Jeffrey is suffering from leprosy, and his family is too embarrassed to tell anyone or let anyone know. Holmes, on the other hand, knows exactly what to do. With him to the Emsworth estate travels the well-known and world-renowned dermatologist, Sir James Saunders, who's able to put everyone's mind at rest by explaining the boy really has something called ichthyosis, which is an easily treatable skin condition that only looks and feels like leprosy. He might as well be right in rain in no time. Like anyone reading the adventures they continue to unfold, a sense of weariness may be creeping in now, but never fear, for they continue to get better. So what are some of the compliance lessons learned by the short story, The Blanched Soldier? I think there are multiple lessons for the 21st century compliance professional. Number one, transparency and ethical duty. The central issue in the story revolves around concealing a serious illness. From a compliance standpoint, however, transparency is critical. Failing to disclose important information, particularly when it pertains to risks like health and safety, can have serious consequences. In a business context, this highlights the importance of transparent communications, especially when dealing with issues that could affect or impact employees, customers, or other stakeholders of your corporation. Number two, due diligence and investigations. Holmes' meticulous approach to investigating the soldier's disappearance, emphasizes the importance of conducting thorough due diligence. In compliance, this means thoroughly vetting business partners, employees, and transactions to ensure there are no hidden risks. It also underscores the importance of understanding the full scope of an issue before drawing conclusions. Number three, confidentiality and sensitive information. Here, the soldier's condition and family dynamics are treated with confidentiality. This aligns with the compliance obligations around this soldier's condition and allows Holmes to get sensitive information, especially personal data. In any investigation, respecting privacy and handling of confidential information with care is paramount to avoiding legal and ethical breaches. Number four, responsibility to act. The story reveals a moral and ethical duty to act when something is wrong. This is clearly appropriate for the 21st century compliance professional who is charged with protecting the institutional justice and institutional fairness in an organization. The family in the story attempts to hide the soldier's illness, a decision that could have worsened his condition. For the compliance professional, this underscores the importance to take corrective action when an issue arises rather than ignoring or concealing the problem, as we recently saw in the TD Bank enforcement action. Number five, health and safety compliance. The focus on contagious illness in this story can be viewed through the lens of health and safety and indeed ESG. Organizations have a duty to comply with laws that are designed to protect the well-being of their employees and the public, ensuring that proper health protocols are followed, especially in high-risk environments. This is a critical component of compliance. The adventure of the Blanched Soldier teaches us that transparency, due diligence, and the ethical handling of sensitive information are core components for an effective compliance program. Holmes' methods reminds us that ignoring or concealing potential risks can have far-reaching consequences and certainly negative consequences for every corporation. This is Tom Fox again. Thank you so much for listening to this story from the final works of Sherlock Holmes, the Case-Book of Sherlock Holmes. As I mentioned at the start of this podcast, Ethico is the Compliance Podcast Network sponsor, and their management toolkit is a great tool for you to use. It's available free, and check out the link in the show notes for more information on it. If you're a Holmes fan or you enjoy analogizing to compliance, leadership, and ethics, this is the podcast series for you. I hope you will take the opportunity to reread one or perhaps all of the short stories. They're short reads and a lot of fun. I'm going to be taking a deep dive into each one of them, looking at leadership lessons, ethical lessons, and/or compliance lessons from each one. If you're a Sherlock Holmes aficionado like myself, I'd love to visit with you about some of your favorite stories and perhaps record a podcast or two with you on them. So please contact me. You can reach me through the website of the Compliance Podcast Network. Adventures in Compliance is a special production of the Compliance Podcast Network. And as I mentioned, we are sponsored this month by Ethico. So I hope you will check out the Ethico white paper that's available through their special link that we put in the show notes that I mentioned earlier. Join us next week where we continue our exploration of the Case-Book of Sherlock Holmes with the Illustrated Client.